Hey everyone, my name is Ben Chaish, and today we are checking out two different 28mm f5.6 lenses for the Leica M mount system from TTArtisan and 7Artisans. So while the internals are different in terms of optics, the externals and the design are obviously very reminiscent of the Leica Summation. That being said, it is a very small and compact lens. The lens hood makes it seem much bigger than it really is, because if you take that off, it's less than half of the size and is about as close to a pancake lens as you're gonna get. So if you want a small little walk around lens, I do think this is a really cool little option here. And if you want to see my comparison between this and the actual Leica Summation 28mm, a very unfair comparison, but interesting nonetheless. I'll definitely link it up wherever those things go. It is a beautiful lens and obviously very Leica reminiscent, inspired would be a understatement. But that being said, you know, it's an available product on the market and it looks amazing with this setup. It really is just a beautiful lens, and for what it is, performs really, really well. And so because it was so similar to the Leica version, people like even myself were saying, oh man, I wish there was a way that they could have done a very similar version, but also kind of thrown their own spin at it. And ask and you will receive, apparently, because this is the 7Artisans version, and they basically did just that. They took a very similar approach to this thing with the same kind of like focusing thing here. They made their own type of lens hood that is very vintage inspired, but also is kind of their own thing with their little, I think it's like the when or whatever symbol there that also is put here. But that being said, I'm not sure if the majority of people are going to choose this aesthetically over the vintage Leica version for a couple reasons. The first of which is just stylistically, the numbers on here are a lot bigger, and so it's more of just kind of like an in-your-face type of thing, which again, like stylistically, whatever, but you know, you're putting a relatively inexpensive lens on a relatively expensive camera, and part of that, if we're being honest, is the just overall aesthetic and appeal of the camera. So I do wish this was more subtle, and I have, to be honest, considered even just filling in the markings here to make it look, you know, more minimalistic and whatnot. But the other thing about this is that it's also just a lot bigger. Again, it's not a very big lens, but when you put the two cameras together, you can definitely see that the 7Artisans version is significantly larger than the TTArtisans version, especially if you take off the lens hoods, because the TTArtisan lens hood makes it look a lot bigger than it really is in comparison to the 7Artisans one. So once you really look at it like that, again, it's not like they're huge lenses no matter what, but you can definitely see a pretty decent, you know, size difference. Although, again, a very minimal setup in general, but it's probably, I mean, almost twice as big in terms of length. It also feels a little bit more plasticky. Obviously, the one from TTArtisan just feels very kind of like brass and heavy. And I don't know, obviously don't know that much about materials, but it feels very much in line with what I would expect to buy, you know, the Summation would feel like. This one definitely feels a lot lighter and is probably made of some sort of metal. I'm not sure what that necessarily would be, but it definitely feels a lot lighter and less well built, probably because of that. Not saying it's poorly built, but it just doesn't feel as, you know, heavy and solid as the other one. You're getting your aperture in hole stops here, and that feels great. I wish it was a little bit clickier, but not that big a deal. Then this goes down to 1 meter is the closest it will focus. And that's dead on focusing. So it'll obviously focus a little bit closer because you're shooting at a wide angle at 5.6. So you can see there with your kind of depth of field portion here where 5.6 to 5.6 is pretty far apart. And then if you stop down to f8, we're getting even further. So, you know, you definitely can do a lot with this lens, especially in terms of zone focusing. So overall, I definitely prefer the look of the TTArtisan version because, again, it's very much reminiscent of the Leica version and kind of fits the aesthetic of a Leica camera, in my opinion. Now, before we look into the images, one random thing that I noticed when comparing these two, and I probably honestly wouldn't have noticed it had I not been using both cameras together because I'm just used to looking through the viewfinder, not even really paying that much attention to the frame lines. But the TTArtisan version pulls up the 28mm frame lines, and the 7Artisan version pulls up the 35mm frame lines. So I'm not sure if it is a just my copy type of issue. So if you have had experience with this lens, let me know in the comments below if it's just kind of like a dud, I got a weird copy, or if it's a issue with every single copy that went out, because it is just, yeah, bizarre to me that is an issue. That being said, I took these out. I was originally planning on filming this video on the way to an elopement, so I have a few samples there, but I ended up, you know, the drive took longer than I expected. So I took my boys out to the beach the other day and decided to take both cameras along, as well as my FX3, and shoot some sample images there. So let's see how they look, and I guess we can make a decision upon whether, you know, you should go for one or the other. right, so figured I'd do a little bit of a breakdown on these images now that we've seen them, I guess, side by side, but then looking at them a little bit more in depth could be definitely helpful. So here we go. The information is up here in the sort of upper left-hand corner. I used the app EXIF editor to add which lens was which. So I have the metadata put in here because these are not 6-bit coded lenses. So I have to manually do that myself. But luckily I have 2 different Leica M10 bodies and was able to just go back and forth. Starting here with the 7Artisans version, you can see my son here throwing a rock in the water, but you can see that it is darker and seems to have more contrast than the TTArtisans version. If we watched the original video that I did with the Summicron, you also saw that the TTArtisan lacked a bit of contrast as well, which I think is more of like a feature, I guess, than a negative in a lens like this. But zooming in to, let's say, 200%, look up here in the corner. All these are shot wide open, and wide open on these lenses is 5.6. So, and also obviously at the same settings. So you can see 500 at 5.6 at ISO 400 for both these lenses. So at 200%, you're looking pretty darn sharp all the way into the corners. I mean, this is close. So, you know, it looks pretty darn sharp in the middle. In the far corners, you're seeing some issues with vignetting, but I mean, it's pretty darn good. The TTArtisan version, however, is definitely a lot, I don't even know if soft would be the word for it, but getting into the center, everything is totally sharp. You can see even like the outline of Mount Rainier there. You can see a little bit of chromatic aberration in the trees, but I do like how it kind of falls off. We have plenty of contrast up here. You can see kind of some almost smearing up here. But I mean, to be honest, I kind of like that about this lens. The center at 5.6 is plenty sharp. If we move back over to the 7Artisans, it's also very sharp. I do oddly feel like you see less of Mount Rainier right here between the two. But overall, I mean, you can see some of the shipping stuff in the background on both of these lenses. But the TTArtisan definitely is less sharp as you get to the edges, especially because you can see it. It's just completely out of focus. Both of them should have been focused to infinity, so it's definitely, I don't know, an issue of sorts there. Let's jump into these just to kind of get an idea. So again, these are the same settings, and you can see that the TTArtisan is a decent amount brighter, maybe like a third of a stop, half of a stop, something like that. All right, here's another one that we can check in on. The 7Artisans here and the TTArtisan here. Obviously, my framing is slightly different, so it's kind of hard, but you can definitely tell a pretty significant amount of exposure change between the 7Artisans at 5.6 and the TTArtisan also at 5.6. So pretty interesting there. 7Artisans, let's look up here and just kind of see our detail. A ton of detail. Almost like a shocking amount of detail, to be honest, based off of what this lens is supposed to sort of be like and for. And then we actually don't look too bad on here as well. The TTArtisan looks pretty sharp there. Looks pretty decent in the corner. See a little bit of that there. Let's move over and see what that looks like on the 7Artisans version. Pretty similar. So this again is the TTArtisan one. Looking into the corner here. We'll do the same thing with the 7Artisans. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot more of a uniform look throughout with the 7Artisans version. To me, it just feels more modern. And I guess that kind of just fits with the look and the aesthetic of the lens as well. It just looks vintage inspired, I guess, but more modern, where the TTArtisan one just looks
more vintage, and I feel like performs in a more vintage way as well.
So I'd love to hear what you thought about the images. I guess I wasn't surprised either way. I would definitely say that, again, I like the look and the aesthetic of the TTArtisan one. And it's not the size of a lens cap by any means, but I definitely can stick it in a bag a lot easier than the 7Artisans version. That being said, the 7Artisans version was a good performer, so depending on what you're looking for, obviously you can go either way. That thing about the viewfinder not switching to 28mm though can be a huge downside for many. To be honest, I just sort of use the edge of the frame lines anyway when I'm wearing glasses and looking through just a standard Leica viewfinder, so it's not that big a deal to me, but it's one of those like almost quality control issues where if this is a problem with just my copy, that shouldn't have happened in the first place. But if it's a problem with all of the copies, that is just bizarre to me that it would leave the factory en masse like that and get shipped out to consumers. So thanks so much for watching. Again, let me know what you think of all these in the comments down below. Give this video a like if you've made it this far, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all on the next one.